Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and thank you for joining me today because what we are about to talk about might completely change the way you look at the smallest coin in your pocket, the humble 1-cent piece, and especially the 1973 no-mint mark 1 cent from the United States, a coin that most people have seen, touched, spent, or ignored without a second thought, yet according to collectors, stories, auction legends, and rare error discoveries, certain examples of this ordinary-looking penny are rumored, believed, and discussed as being worth as much as $21 million, and whether you are a seasoned coin collector, a curious beginner, or someone who just enjoys stories about hidden treasure and unbelievable discoveries, this is the kind of topic that keeps people glued to the screen because it blends history, mystery, mistakes, and the thrilling idea that life-changing money could be hiding in plain sight. So sit back and imagine this scenario as we explore how a 1973 no-mint mark 1 cent could become one of the most valuable pennies ever talked about, starting with the basics that make this coin special, moving into the errors, mistakes, and rare possibilities that fuel its incredible value, and ending with why people around the world continue to search through old jars, inherited collections, and pocket change hoping to find one extraordinary example that defies all expectations. The year 1973 was part of a fascinating transitional period in American coinage, a time when the United States Mint was dealing with massive production demands, rising metal costs, aging equipment, and increased pressure to produce billions of coins for everyday commerce, and the Lincoln Memorial Cent, designed by Victor David Brenner with the Lincoln portrait on the front and the memorial building on the back, was being struck in enormous quantities, especially at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not use a mint mark on cents at that time, meaning any 1973 penny without a mint mark was struck in Philadelphia, and while hundreds of millions of these coins were produced, the sheer scale of production also created the perfect environment for mistakes to slip through unnoticed, mistakes that under normal circumstances would be caught, melted, and corrected. But during high-speed minting operations, some flawed coins escaped into circulation, and those rare survivors are the foundation of the multimillion-dollar legends surrounding this coin. One of the most important factors behind the rumored $21 million value is the presence of extreme mint errors, not small imperfections but dramatic, undeniable mistakes that fundamentally change the appearance, composition, or structure of the coin, such as being struck on the wrong metal planchet, struck multiple times, struck with misaligned dies, or struck using damaged or experimental dies. And among these, one of the most talked about possibilities is the idea of a 1973 cent struck on a bronze or copper planchet intended for an earlier year, or even on a foreign planchet or experimental metal, which would instantly elevate its rarity to near mythical status, because by 1973 the composition of the cent had shifted to primarily copper-plated zinc, yet the mint was still experimenting with different alloys due to rising copper prices. And a coin accidentally struck on an off-metal planchet during this chaotic period would represent a unique snapshot of mint history that collectors would fight fiercely to own. Another powerful value driver is the concept of a double die error, particularly a dramatic double die obverse or reverse where the design elements appear clearly doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process. And while minor doubling is common and often worth little, a strong double die showing obvious separation in the date, lettering, or Lincoln's profile can turn a common penny into a 6 or 7-figure treasure, and if a previously unknown, ultra-strong double die variety from 1973 were to surface, especially one in pristine uncirculated condition, the shockwaves through the numismatic community could be enormous, pushing valuations into previously unthinkable territory, especially if the coin were unique or one of only a handful known to exist. Then there are strike errors so dramatic that they border on unbelievable, such as a 1973 penny struck multiple times while rotating between strikes, creating a swirling, overlapping design, or a broad strike where the coin was struck without a collar, causing it to spread out like a pancake with distorted details, or a struck-through error where grease, cloth, wire, or other foreign material interfered with the strike, leaving mysterious voids or shapes embedded in the metal. And while many of these errors exist in small numbers, a perfectly preserved, visually stunning example with a clear story behind it could become the crown jewel of any collection, especially if certified and authenticated by top grading services. Die errors also play a major role in the valuation myth surrounding the 1973 no-mint mark cent, because dies are the tools that stamp the design onto the coin, and when those dies crack, chip, clash, or wear excessively, they can produce coins with dramatic flaws such as missing letters, distorted portraits, extra lines, or even large raised blobs of metal known as cut errors. And a massive cut error on a 1973 cent, particularly one affecting Lincoln's face or the Memorial Building, would be highly desirable due to its visual impact and rarity. And if such a coin were unique or part of a very small known group, its value could climb exponentially over time as collectors compete for ownership. Another intriguing possibility that fuels the $21 million discussion is the idea of transitional errors, coins struck with dies or planchets intended for a different year, design, or composition, and during times of change or experimentation at the mint. Transitional errors are some of the most valuable coins ever discovered, because they represent a mistake that technically should not exist. And a 1973 penny accidentally struck with a leftover die from a different year, or on a planchet intended for a different denomination, would be an extraordinary anomaly that collectors would consider priceless, especially if documentation or metallurgical analysis confirmed its authenticity. Condition is another crucial piece of the puzzle, because even the rarest error loses value if it is heavily worn or damaged, while a flawless example preserved in mint state condition with sharp details, full luster, and no post-mint damage can multiply in value many times over. And when people talk about multi-million-dollar pennies, they are usually imagining a coin graded at the highest levels, such as MS-67, MS-68, or even higher, where the coin looks almost exactly as it did the moment it left the press, frozen in time for over 50 years, and such preservation combined with a major error is what pushes values into the realm of headlines and viral stories. The role of professional grading and authentication cannot be ignored, because for a 1973 no-mint mark cent to command a value anywhere near $21 million, it would need to be examined, verified, and encapsulated by trusted third-party grading services, with detailed attribution of the error type, metal composition, and strike characteristics. And once such a coin is certified, it enters a global marketplace where elite collectors, investors, and museums compete, often driving prices far beyond initial estimates due to bidding wars fueled by prestige and the fear of missing out on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Auction history and storytelling also play a major role in perceived value, because coins that are tied to dramatic discovery stories, such as being found in a roll, inherited from a relative, or discovered by chance in everyday change, tend to capture the public imagination, and when a coin becomes famous, its fame alone can add to its value, creating a feedback loop where media coverage, social media buzz, and collector interest reinforce one another, pushing prices higher and higher as the coin becomes a legend rather than just an object. It is also important to understand that the $21 million figure often represents a theoretical or potential value rather than a confirmed sale, reflecting what collectors believe such a coin could be worth if the perfect combination of rarity, error type, condition, and timing were to align. And in the world of numismatics, belief, anticipation, and scarcity can be just as powerful as documented sales, especially when dealing with unique or near-unique items where there are no direct comparisons. Next, 1980 D-Mint Mark 1 cent USA coin, a penny that millions of people have handled, spent, and ignored over the years, yet under very specific and rare circumstances has been talked about, speculated upon, and imagined as being worth as much as $11 million, a figure that sounds impossible until you begin to understand the complex mix of history, minting chaos, experimental metals, dramatic errors, and once-in-a-generation possibilities that surround this particular coin. And as always, this discussion is meant to open your eyes, spark curiosity, and remind you why so many collectors continue searching through old jars and forgotten boxes hoping to discover something extraordinary hiding in plain sight. The year 1980 sits at a fascinating crossroads in United States mint history, because it followed closely after one of the most turbulent periods in modern coinage, when rising copper prices forced the mint to radically change the composition of the 1-cent coin from solid bronze to copper-plated zinc in 1982. But even before that official change, the late 1970s and early 1980s were filled with testing, experimentation, and logistical challenges, and the Denver Mint, identified by the D Mint mark on the coin, was operating at extremely high capacity to meet nationwide demand for small change, striking billions of cents with aging equipment, overworked dies, and massive pressure to maintain output, conditions that are historically known to produce some of the most fascinating and valuable mint errors ever discovered. The standard 1980D penny was supposed to be made of bronze, consisting primarily of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc, but behind the scenes the mint was already deeply concerned about metal costs, storage, and future transitions, and this environment created opportunities for off-metal errors, transitional planchets, and experimental strikes that technically should never have left the mint. Yet history shows that some always do. One of the most powerful reasons a 1980D 1-cent coin could be valued in the realm of $11 million is the possibility of it being struck on the wrong planchet, particularly on a copper-plated zinc planchet intended for later years, or even on an experimental alloy that was never officially released. Because a confirmed transitional error where a 1980D cent was struck on a planchet composition not authorized for circulation that year would represent a numismatic anomaly of the highest order, instantly placing the coin among the rarest modern cents ever known. Even more astonishing would be the discovery of a 1980D cent struck on a foreign planchet or on a planchet intended for a different denomination entirely, such as a dime or foreign coin blank, because such errors are not only visually dramatic but also incredibly scarce, and when combined with pristine condition and professional authentication, they can command prices that defy logic and precedent. Another major factor driving the $11 million discussion is the potential for extreme double die errors, particularly double die verse varieties where the date, lettering, or Lincoln's profile shows strong, unmistakable doubling caused by a misalignment during the die creation process. And while minor doubling is relatively common and often dismissed, a bold, fully separated double die that escaped detection would be a once-in-a-generation discovery for the 1980D issue. Especially because the Denver Mint is traditionally known for fewer doubled die cents compared to Philadelphia, making any major Denver doubled die instantly more desirable due to its scarcity. Beyond doubled dies, there is the possibility of dramatic strike errors that transform an otherwise ordinary penny into a visual masterpiece of minting chaos, including multiple strikes where the coin was struck more than once while rotating between blows, creating overlapping images of Lincoln and distorted lettering, or off-center strikes where a significant portion of the design is missing yet the date and mint mark remain visible, a critical factor for value, because collectors prize errors where the identity of the coin is still clear. Broad strikes are another captivating category, occurring when the coin is struck without the restraining collar, causing it to expand outward and flatten, sometimes producing oversized cents with warped designs that look almost unreal. And while many broad strikes exist, a perfectly preserved 1980D broad strike with dramatic expansion and full mint luster could become a showpiece coin that collectors would aggressively pursue. Die-related errors also play a central role in elevating the potential value of a 1980D cent, because dies deteriorate over time, and when they crack, chip, or clash, they can produce coins with missing elements, raised metal blobs known as cuds, or ghostly outlines of opposing designs, and a massive cut error affecting Lincoln's face, the date, or the mint mark would be especially significant, because it dramatically alters the coin's appearance while telling a clear story about die failure. At the mint, clash dies, where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, can leave faint but fascinating impressions of Lincoln's profile on the reverse or parts of the memorial on the obverse, and strong, well-defined clashes are always in demand, particularly when they occur on coins from high-production years like 1980 where such dramatic clashes are less frequently preserved in high grade. Another extraordinary possibility that fuels the $11 million narrative is the existence of a meal error, a coin struck with mismatched dies from different denominations or designs, and while mule errors are extremely rare and usually discovered decades later, a confirmed 1980 D-cent mule would instantly become one of the most famous modern U.S.-era coins ever known. Because it represents a fundamental breakdown in minting procedures that should have been impossible, yet history proves that impossible things sometimes happen. The condition of the coin is an absolutely critical element in any discussion of multi-million-dollar value, because collectors at the highest level demand perfection, and a coin graded in the upper mint state range, with blazing original luster, razor-sharp details, and no post-mint damage, can be worth many times more than the same error in circulated condition. And when people imagine an $11,001,980 D penny, they are envisioning a coin that looks as if it just rolled off the press, untouched by time, preserved either by chance or by a collector who recognized its importance early on. Professional grading and authentication are non-negotiable at this level, because any claim of extreme value must be supported by rigorous analysis, including metallurgical testing to confirm composition, microscopic examination to verify error characteristics, and comparison with known varieties to establish uniqueness or rarity. And once such a coin is certified by a leading grading service, it enters a global marketplace where elite collectors, investors, and institutions compete not just for the coin itself, but for the prestige of owning a piece of numismatic history. Auction dynamics can push prices far beyond expectations, especially when two or more wealthy collectors decide that a particular coin fills a critical gap in their collection, and in cases where a coin is unique, or one of only a few known examples, the lack of comparable sales can actually drive prices higher, because bidders are forced to decide what the coin is worth to them personally rather than relying on past data. The storytelling aspect cannot be underestimated, because coins with compelling discovery stories often capture the imagination of the public, and a dramatic narrative such as a rare 1980 D penny found in a childhood collection, an inherited jar of change, or a forgotten bankroll adds emotional weight that enhances desirability, turning the coin into a legend rather than just an object. Media coverage, online discussions, and viral videos further amplify this effect, creating a sense of urgency and excitement that can elevate perceived value far beyond what traditional price guides might suggest. It is also important to understand that the $11 million figure represents a theoretical peak value, reflecting what the most perfect, most dramatic, and most unique example could potentially command under ideal conditions, rather than a guaranteed or typical price. And in numismatics, such figures often serve as symbols of possibility rather than promises, reminding collectors why they search, study, and preserve coins with such passion. The continued interest in the 1980 D 1-cent coin is driven by the knowledge that history is full of surprises, and that many of the most valuable coins known today were once dismissed as ordinary, spent casually, or overlooked for decades before their true significance was recognized, and this awareness keeps the hunt alive, encouraging people to learn about mint marks, error types, and grading standards so they can recognize something special if it ever crosses their path. In the end, next, 1960 mint mark D 1-cent USA coin, a small piece of copper that most people would overlook without a second glance, yet under extraordinarily rare circumstances has been talked about as being worth as much as $27 million, a number that sounds unbelievable until you begin to understand the powerful mix of rarity, minting mistakes, transitional varieties, and collector demand that can elevate a simple penny into the realm of legendary treasure. So as you listen, imagine how many times a coin like this may have passed through ordinary hands, spent on candy, groceries, or newspapers, while silently carrying the potential to change a life forever. The year 1960 occupies a very special place in U.S. coin history, because it was not just another routine production year, but a moment of transition, experimentation, and immense output at the United States Mint, especially at the Denver Mint, which struck cents bearing the D mint mark. And during this time the Lincoln cent was undergoing subtle but extremely important design and production changes that would later become the foundation for some of the most valuable and sought-after varieties in modern numismatics. In 1960, the mint was producing pennies in staggering quantities to meet the demands of a growing economy, using high-speed presses, massive numbers of dies, and a workforce under constant pressure to maintain output, and whenever production reaches such intense levels, the risk of mistakes increases dramatically, creating opportunities for rare errors to escape detection and enter circulation. One of the most famous and critical aspects of the 1960 penny is the existence of two distinct date styles, commonly known as the small date and the large date, a difference that may seem minor to the untrained eye but represents a significant design variation. And while both date styles were produced in Philadelphia and Denver, the 1960D small date cent is far scarcer than its large date counterpart, instantly making it more desirable to collectors. And when rarity combines with condition and era characteristics, values can climb rapidly into extraordinary territory. The potential for a 1960D cent to reach a value as high as $27 million rests not on ordinary examples, but on the rarest of the rare, coins that combine multiple layers of desirability, beginning with the possibility of being struck with the small date design, then adding a dramatic mint error, and finally preserved in nearly perfect mint state condition. Among the most powerful value drivers is the possibility of a double die error, especially a double die obverse where the date, lettering, and Lincoln's features show strong, unmistakable doubling caused during the die creation process. And while some minor doubled dies are known for 1960, the discovery of an extreme, previously unknown double die variety from the Denver Mint would send shockwaves through the numismatic community, because Denver double dies are traditionally rarer than those from Philadelphia, making any significant example exponentially more valuable. Another extraordinary factor is the possibility of repunched mint marks, a phenomenon common in earlier decades when mint marks were added to dies by hand, and in 1960 the Denver Mint produced dies where the D mint mark could sometimes be punched more than once in slightly different positions, creating visible doubling or overlapping shapes. And while many repunched mint marks exist, a dramatic, bold example on a small date 1960 D cent, especially one paired with other errors, could become one of the most famous pennies ever discovered. Composition plays an equally important role in the $27 million narrative, because the 1960 cent was supposed to be struck on a bronze planchet composed primarily of copper, but history has shown that off-metal errors do occur, and a 1960 D cent struck on the wrong planchet, such as one intended for a different denomination, a foreign coin, or an experimental alloy, would represent an extreme anomaly that collectors would consider priceless, especially if metallurgical testing confirmed that the metal composition does not match any officially authorized cent planchet for that year. Even more astonishing would be the discovery of a transitional error involving a planchet or die intended for a different year or purpose, because such coins technically should not exist, and their very existence challenges assumptions about minting controls and procedures, making them highly desirable to elite collectors and institutions. Strike errors add another layer of intrigue and value to the story, because coins that were struck off-center, struck multiple times, or struck without a collar can look dramatically different from normal cents, and while many minor strike errors exist, a major off-center strike that still clearly shows the date and mint mark, or a multiple struck coin with overlapping images and rotational misalignment, can be visually stunning and extremely rare, and when such errors occur on an already desirable issue like the 1960 D small date cent, their value can multiply dramatically. Broad strikes, where the coin spreads outward due to the absence of a collar, can produce oversized, flattened cents with distorted designs, and a pristine, fully lustrous broad strike from 1960 D would be a showstopper in any collection, particularly if it exhibits sharp details despite its unusual shape. Die-related errors are another cornerstone of high-value pennies, because dies inevitably wear, crack, and fail over time, and when they do, they can produce coins with dramatic flaws such as missing letters, distorted features, or large raised blobs of metal known as cuds, and a massive cut error on a 1960 D cent, especially one affecting Lincoln's portrait or the date, would be instantly recognizable and highly prized, because it tells a clear story of die failure at the mint and creates a one-of-a-kind appearance that cannot be replicated. Die clashes, where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet between them, can leave ghostly impressions of opposing designs, and strong, well-defined clashes are especially appealing to collectors who appreciate the technical side of minting errors, and a bold clash die 1960 cent in high grade could command extraordinary attention and value. Another almost mythical possibility is the existence of a mule error involving a 1960 cent, a coin struck with mismatched dies from different denominations or designs, and while mule errors are exceedingly rare, their discovery has historically resulted in some of the highest prices ever paid for modern coins, because they represent a fundamental breakdown in the minting process that should have been impossible, yet somehow occurred. The condition of the coin is absolutely critical in any discussion of multi-million-dollar value, because collectors at the highest level demand perfection, and a coin graded at the top of the mint state scale, with blazing original luster, sharp strike, and no post-mint damage, can be worth many times more than the same coin in lower condition. And when people imagine a $27,001,960 D penny, they are envisioning a coin that looks as if it was frozen in time the moment it left the press, untouched by circulation, preserved either by chance or by someone who recognized its importance early on. Professional grading and authentication are essential at this level, because any claim of extreme value must be supported by rigorous examination, including microscopic analysis, die study, and metallurgical testing, and once such a coin is certified and encapsulated by a trusted grading service, it enters a global marketplace where elite collectors, investors, and museums compete for ownership, often driving prices far beyond initial expectations due to the prestige and rarity involved. Auction dynamics play a huge role in shaping perceived value, because when a unique or near-unique coin comes to market, the lack of direct comparisons forces bidders to decide how much the coin is worth to them personally, and when two or more wealthy collectors decide they must have the same coin, prices can escalate rapidly into headline-making territory. The story behind the coin also adds immense value, because coins discovered in dramatic or relatable ways, such as being found in a childhood collection, an inherited estate, or a forgotten roll of pennies, capture the imagination of the public and the media, transforming the coin into a legend rather than just an object. And this storytelling element can amplify demand and perceived worth far beyond what traditional price guides might suggest. It is important to understand that the $27 million figure represents a theoretical peak value, reflecting what the most perfect, most dramatic, and most unique example of a 1960 cent could potentially command under ideal conditions, rather than a guaranteed or typical price, and in the world of numismatics, such figures often symbolize possibility and aspiration rather than certainty, reminding collectors why they search, study, and dream. Next, 1980 No Mint Mark 1 cent USA coin, a Lincoln penny that millions upon millions of Americans used without a second thought, yet under extremely rare circumstances has been discussed, imagined, and spoken about as being worth as much as $12 million. A number that sounds unbelievable until you begin to understand the powerful combination of history, minting pressure, rare errors, experimental possibilities, and collector psychology that can transform a simple cent into a legendary treasure. And as always, this story is not just about money, but about curiosity, awareness, and the thrilling idea that something life-changing could be hiding in plain sight. The year 1980 was a complex and stressful time for the United States Mint, especially for the Philadelphia Mint, which produced cents without a mint mark, because the nation was dealing with inflation, rising metal costs, and increasing demand for circulating coinage, and although the official composition change from bronze to copper-plated zinc would not occur until 1982. The late 1970s and early 1980s were filled with behind-the-scenes testing, preparation, and experimentation that created opportunities for unusual errors to occur, and when billions of coins are produced at high speed using aging equipment and massive numbers of dies, even the most tightly controlled systems can fail in small but significant ways. The standard 1980 No Mint Mark penny was intended to be struck in bronze, consisting of approximately 95% copper. Yet this period is closely examined by collectors because it sits right on the edge of one of the most important transitions in modern U.S. coinage history, and transitional periods are exactly when some of the most valuable errors are created. One of the most powerful reasons a 1980 no-mint mark cent could reach a theoretical value of $12 million is the possibility of a major off-metal error, such as being struck on a copper-plated zinc planchet intended for a later year, or on an experimental alloy that was never officially released to the public, because such a coin would represent a mistake that technically should not exist. And numismatics has shown again and again that coins which should not exist often become the most valuable of all. Even more astonishing would be the discovery of a 1980 Philadelphia cent struck on a foreign planchet or on a planchet intended for a different denomination, such as a dime or a foreign coin blank, because these errors are not only incredibly rare but also visually striking, instantly separating them from ordinary cents and making them centerpieces of elite collections. Another major factor fueling the $12 million discussion is the possibility of a dramatic double die obverse or reverse, a type of error created during the die manufacturing process when the design is impressed onto the die more than once at slightly different angles, resulting in clear, separated doubling of the date, lettering, or Lincoln's features, and while minor doubling is common and often dismissed, a bold, strong double die from 1980 Philadelphia that escaped detection would be a monumental discovery, especially if it showed clear doubling on the date and inscriptions that could be seen without magnification. Strike errors also play a critical role in elevating potential value, because coins that were struck off-center, struck multiple times, or struck without a collar can look dramatically different from normal issues, and while many minor strike errors exist, a major off-center strike that still clearly shows the full date and key design elements can be extraordinarily valuable, particularly when preserved in mint state condition. Multiple strike errors, where the coin was struck more than once while rotating or shifting between blows, can produce overlapping, distorted images that tell a clear story of minting chaos, and a visually stunning multiple strike 1980 no-mint mark cent would be fiercely sought after by collectors who appreciate the artistry hidden within mechanical failure. Broad strikes are another captivating category, occurring when the coin is struck without the retaining collar, allowing the metal to spread outward and flatten, creating an oversized, warped appearance. And although broad strikes are known, a perfectly preserved, fully lustrous example from 1980 Philadelphia would stand out as a dramatic and rare survivor. Die-related errors further strengthen the legend surrounding this coin, because dies inevitably wear out, crack, chip, or clash during extended use, and when they do, they can produce coins with missing letters, distorted features, raised metal blobs known as cuds, or ghostly outlines of opposing designs, and a massive cut error affecting Lincoln's portrait, the date, or the word Liberty would be instantly recognizable and highly prized, especially if the error progressed and only a few examples escaped before the die was replaced. Clash dies, where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet in between, can leave faint but fascinating impressions of the memorial building on Lincoln's face or Lincoln's outline on the reverse, and strong, dramatic clashes from high production years like 1980 are especially desirable because most were quickly corrected or wore away before many coins were struck. Another almost mythical possibility that drives the $12 million valuation discussion is the existence of a mule error involving a 1980 no-mint mark cent, a coin struck using mismatched dies from different denominations or designs, and while mule errors are extremely rare, their discovery has historically resulted in some of the highest prices ever paid for modern coins, because they represent a fundamental breakdown in minting procedures that were designed to prevent exactly this kind of mistake. Condition is absolutely essential in any discussion of multi-million-dollar coins, because collectors at the highest level demand near perfection, and a coin graded at the top of the mint state scale, with blazing original luster, sharp strike, and no post-mint damage, can be worth exponentially more than the same error in circulated condition. And when people imagine a $12,001,980 penny, they are envisioning a coin that looks as though it has been frozen in time, untouched since the moment it left the press over 4 decades ago. Professional grading and authentication are non-negotiable at this level, because any claim of extreme value must be supported by expert examination, including microscopic analysis of the strike, detailed die studies, and metallurgical testing to confirm composition, And once such a coin is certified by a leading grading service, it enters a global marketplace where elite collectors, investors, and institutions compete not only for the coin itself but for the prestige and historical significance it represents. Auction dynamics can push values far beyond expectations, especially when a coin is unique or one of only a handful known, because the absence of comparable sales forces bidders to decide what the coin is worth to them personally. And when two or more wealthy collectors decide that a particular coin is essential to their collection, bidding wars can escalate rapidly into headline-making territory. The story behind the coin also adds tremendous value, because coins discovered in relatable or dramatic ways, such as being found in a childhood collection, an inherited jar of pennies, or a forgotten bankroll, capture the imagination of the public and the media, turning the coin into a legend rather than just an object. And this storytelling element can amplify demand and perceived worth far beyond what traditional price guides might suggest. It is important to understand that the $12 million figure represents a theoretical peak value, reflecting what the most perfect, most dramatic, and most unique example of a 1980 no-mint mark cent could potentially command under ideal conditions, rather than a guaranteed or typical price. And in numismatics, such figures often symbolize possibility rather than certainty, reminding collectors why they search, study, and hope. The continued fascination with the 1980 no-mint mark 1 cent coin exists because history has repeatedly shown that extraordinary coins can remain hidden for decades, dismissed as ordinary or overlooked entirely, before suddenly emerging to rewrite what collectors thought was possible. And this awareness keeps the hunt alive, inspiring people to learn about errors, varieties, and grading standards so they can recognize something special if it ever appears in their hands. In the end, the story of the 1980 no-mint mark 1 cent USA coin rumored to be worth $12 million is about more than just money. It is about curiosity, patience, and the timeless human fascination with rarity and discovery, about how small mistakes made inside the mint long ago can echo through time to create objects of immense desire and value. And whether or not such a coin ever officially sells for that staggering amount, the belief that it could continues to inspire collectors around the world to look closer at their change, respect the history each coin carries, and never underestimate the hidden potential of the smallest piece of copper in their pocket.